When Mary Austin walked into that courtroom believing her father's billions could buy her freedom from vehicular manslaughter, she had no idea Judge Elias Monroe was about to teach her the most expensive lesson money couldn't purchase. If you're ready to see true justice in action, hit that like button right now. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Superior Court Judge Elias Monroe's courtroom, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany benches. The light had that particular quality of early autumn, golden but somehow cold, illuminating dust particles that hung suspended in the air like tiny witnesses to the proceedings about to unfold. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, the kind of profound silence that precedes moments that will be remembered, discussed, dissected for years to come. Judge Monroe sat elevated behind his bench, a man in his early 60s, whose very presence commanded a gravity that transcended his physical form. His silver hair was combed back with precision, his black robe impeccable, but it was his eyes, dark, penetrating, impossibly patient, that truly defined him. Those eyes had witnessed 3 decades of human nature at its worst and occasionally its best. They missed nothing. They judged everything, not with cruelty, but with an unwavering commitment to the principle that had guided his entire career. The law knows no privilege, recognizes no dynasty, bows to no wealth. The gallery behind the bar was packed to capacity, an unusual occurrence for a preliminary hearing that should have been routine. But there was nothing routine about this case. The defendant was Mary Austin, 23 years old, only daughter of tech billionaire Marcus Austin, whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations. The victim was Elena Vasquez, a 31-year-old hospice nurse and single mother of 2, who had been walking home from her night shift when Mary's custom pearl-white Maserati, traveling at 87 miles per hour in a 35 zone, had struck her in a crosswalk. Elena had died at the scene. Her body had been thrown 40 feet. Her children, ages 7 and 9, had been asleep when the police knocked on their grandmother's door at 3 in the morning. That had been 4 months ago. 4 months during which Marcus Austin's legal team had filed motion after motion, seeking dismissals on technicalities, questioning evidence handling, attempting to suppress the dashcam footage from a passing delivery truck that had captured everything. 4 months during which Mary had been photographed at beach resorts in Cabo, nightclubs in Miami, fashion shows in Paris, always with a cocktail in hand and a smile on her face that suggested she'd already forgotten why there were legal proceedings at all. The prosecution was being handled by Deputy District Attorney Sarah Chen, a woman in her late 30s whose reputation for thoroughness and moral conviction had made her enemies in certain circles of power. She stood at her table now, a stack of files before her expression neutral, but her eyes burning with purpose. Across the aisle sat the defense team, 4 attorneys from Whitmore and Associates, the most expensive criminal defense firm in the state, each dressed in suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. At the center of this wall of legal firepower sat Mary Austin herself. She was objectively beautiful in the way that unlimited wealth could manufacture. Perfect skin, salon-perfect hair that fell in honey-blonde waves, designer clothes chosen to suggest humble contrition, but tailored too precisely to be anything but calculated. She wore a cream-colored suit, pearl earrings, minimal makeup, the costume of someone performing remorse without feeling it. Every few moments she would glance at her phone, hidden beneath the table, her manicured fingers scrolling through messages as if she were waiting in line at a coffee shop, rather than facing charges for vehicular manslaughter. Judge Monroe's gaze had tracked this behavior from the moment she entered his courtroom. He said nothing. He simply watched, those patient eyes cataloging every gesture of disrespect, every display of entitlement, storing them away for the moment they would matter most. "All rise," the bailiff announced, though everyone was already standing. "The Superior Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Elias Monroe presiding. In the matter of the state versus Mary Margaret Austin. Please be seated," Monroe said, his voice measured, carrying effortlessly through the courtroom without rising in volume. It was the voice of a man who had never needed to shout to be heard. The assembly sat as one, the sound of shifting bodies and creaking wood filling the momentary silence. "Ms. Chen," Monroe continued, his eyes moving to the prosecutor, "this is your motion to deny bail pending trial. Please proceed." Sarah Chen rose smoothly, gathering her notes. "Thank you, Your Honor. The people move to deny bail and remand the defendant to custody based on 3 primary concerns: flight risk, the severity of the charges, and the defendant's demonstrated disregard for the conditions of her current release. One of the defense attorneys, a silver-haired man named Richard Whitmore, whose career had been built on getting the wealthy out of consequences, started to rise. "Your Honor, if I may." Monroe's hand rose slightly, a gesture so minimal it was barely movement at all. Yet it stopped Whitmore as effectively as if a wall had materialized. "You will have your opportunity, Mr. Whitmore. Ms. Chen has the floor." Chen nodded her appreciation and continued. "Your Honor, since her release 4 months ago, the defendant has traveled internationally on 7 separate occasions, including trips to Mexico, France, Monaco, and the Bahamas. Despite her passport being surrendered as a condition of bail, she utilized her family's private aircraft to circumvent normal customs procedures. We have documentation of all these trips, obtained through aviation records and her own social media posts." Chen lifted a tablet, projecting images onto the courtroom screen. Mary on a yacht, champagne glass raised. Mary at a casino in Monte Carlo. Mary on a beach, the caption reading, "Living my best life, haters can stay pressed." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Monroe's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened imperceptibly. "Furthermore," Chen continued, "the defendant has failed to complete even a single hour of the court-ordered community service, has missed 2 scheduled meetings with her pretrial services officer, and has been documented consuming alcohol at public establishments at least 15 times, in direct violation of her bail conditions. The people believe these actions demonstrate not only flight risk, but a fundamental contempt for this court's authority and the gravity of the charges she faces." Chen paused, her voice dropping slightly but gaining intensity. "Your Honor, Elena Vasquez was a hospice nurse. She spent her professional life comforting the dying and their families. She worked double shifts to provide for her 2 children. On the night she was killed, she was walking home because her car had broken down and she couldn't afford to fix it. She was in a marked crosswalk. The traffic light was red. The defendant was traveling at nearly 90 miles per hour, was found to have a blood alcohol content of 16, twice the legal limit, and never touched her brakes. The skid marks didn't start until 30 feet after impact. Elena Vasquez's children now live with their grandmother in a 2-bedroom apartment. They have nightmares. The youngest won't cross streets anymore, even holding an adult's hand. The oldest, who's 9, now believes his mother died because they were too poor to fix their car. The courtroom was utterly silent now, the kind of silence that feels heavy, oppressive, the silence of collective recognition that something profoundly wrong had occurred and remained unresolved. "The defendant," Chen concluded, "has shown through her actions that she believes none of this matters, that her father's wealth insulates her from consequences, that this court's orders are suggestions rather than requirements. The people ask that she be remanded to custody pending trial to ensure her presence, and to demonstrate that in this courtroom at least, all citizens stand equal before the law." Chen sat down. The silence held for another beat before Richard Whitmore rose, his expensive suit catching the light, his face arranged in an expression of wounded reasonableness. "Your Honor," Whitmore began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "what we've just heard is an emotional appeal designed to prejudice this court against my client, based not on legal standards, but on class resentment. My client comes from a prominent family, yes. Her father is successful, yes. But since when is success in America grounds for presuming guilt? Since when is wealth evidence of wrongdoing?" Whitmore moved closer to the bench, his hands spread in a gesture of openness. "The trips Ms. Chen mentioned were all approved by my client's pretrial services officer through proper channels. The social media posts were taken out of context. And regarding the community service, my client has been dealing with severe emotional trauma from this incident. She's been under psychiatric care, struggling with depression and anxiety. We have medical documentation. To punish her for seeking mental health treatment seems not only unjust, but cruel." Judge Monroe's expression remained neutral, but anyone who knew him well would have recognized the infinitesimal tightening at the corner of his mouth. He leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Whitmore, do you have these medical records and documentation of pretrial services approvals with you?" Whitmore hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "They're being compiled, Your Honor. We can submit them by—" "That would be no then," Monroe said quietly. "Please continue." Whitmore's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. Your Honor, my client poses no flight risk. Her entire life is here. Her family, her friends, her home. She's a young woman who made a tragic mistake, but she's not a criminal. She's certainly not someone who needs to be caged like a danger to society. The bail conditions set were adequate and remain adequate. She's complied with all substantive requirements. She's traveled internationally 7 times using her family's private jet to avoid surrendering her passport. Judge Monroe interrupted, his voice still quiet, but with an edge now, like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. She's consumed alcohol publicly and repeatedly despite a court order prohibiting it. She's documented these violations on social media with captions mocking the very concept of consequence. Which of these, Mr. Whitmore, do you consider compliant? Whitmore's composure flickered. Your Honor, with respect, young people use social media differently than your generation might. My generation, Monroe said, and now there was steel in his voice, understands that when you kill someone, you don't post yacht photos with champagne while their children cry themselves to sleep. Please sit down, Mr. Whitmore. The attorney sat, his face flushed. The gallery shifted, people leaning forward. This was why the courtroom was packed. Word had spread that Judge Monroe, known for his patience but also for his absolute intolerance of privilege asserting itself over justice, was handling this case. People had come to see if the rumors about Mary Austin's behavior were true, and more importantly, to see what Monroe would do about it. Judge Monroe turned his attention to the defense table, specifically to Mary herself. She had been scrolling through her phone again during the arguments, only half listening, occasionally rolling her eyes at something she read on the screen. Monroe watched her for a long moment, that patient, penetrating gaze, waiting. "Ms. Austin," he said finally. She looked up startled, as if she'd forgotten where she was. "Yes? Stand up, please." Mary glanced at her attorneys, confused, but rose slowly. She stood with one hip cocked, her posture suggesting impatience rather than respect, like a teenager called to the principal's office for something she didn't believe was actually wrong. "Ms. Austin," Monroe continued, his voice conversational now, almost gentle. "Do you understand why you're in this courtroom today?" She blinked, clearly uncertain how to respond. There was an accident. A woman was... Her name was Elena Vasquez," Monroe said. "Use it." Mary's face hardened slightly, the first crack in her performed contrition. "Fine. Elena Vasquez was hit by my car, but it was an accident. I didn't mean for it to happen. You were driving at 87 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone, is that correct?" "I guess." "Yes or no, Ms. Austin?" "Yes." "You had been drinking alcohol that evening, had you not?" "I had a few drinks, but I was fine." "I drive better than most people even when I've had..." "Your blood alcohol content was 0.16, Ms. Austin. You were legally drunk. You ran a red light. You struck a woman in a crosswalk and killed her. Is that accurate?" Mary's jaw clenched. Her carefully constructed mask was beginning to slip, irritation bleeding through. "Look, I've said I'm sorry. I don't know what else people want from me. It was an accident. Accidents happen. I can't bring her back." The courtroom seemed to crystallize around those words. Even the air felt different, charged, dangerous. In the gallery, someone, probably one of Elena's family members, made a sound, half gasp, half sob. Sarah Chen's hands tightened on the edge of her table. The defense attorneys looked at each other in alarm, recognizing that their client had just done something catastrophically stupid. But it was Judge Monroe's reaction that everyone would remember. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't even change his expression. He simply looked at Mary Austin with those dark, patient, all-seeing eyes. And when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, yet it filled the courtroom like thunder. "You can't bring her back," he repeated. "That's your response to taking a human life. Accidents happen. Tell me, Ms. Austin, do you think Elena Vasquez's children think it was just an accident? Do you think her 72-year-old mother, who now has to raise 2 young children on a fixed income, thinks accidents just happen? Do you think the hospice patients Elena was caring for, who lost someone who made their final days bearable, think this was simply an unfortunate accident?" Mary's face was reddening now, her composure disintegrating. This isn't fair. You're trying to make me sound like a monster. I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Not everyone makes mistakes that cost innocent lives, Miss Austin. Well, maybe if she hadn't been walking in the middle of the night, maybe if she'd been paying more attention. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouts of outrage, people standing. The bailiff moved forward, calling for order. Monroe's gavel came down once, twice, 3 times, each strike like a gunshot in the chaos. Order. Order in this courtroom or I will clear the gallery. The noise subsided, but the damage was done. Mary had said the quiet part loud, had revealed what everyone suspected, but now knew for certain. She believed this was Elena's fault for being poor, for walking, for having the audacity to be in the crosswalk when Mary's Maserati came through. Monroe's expression had changed now. The patience was gone, burned away by something harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous. When he spoke again, his voice could have cut glass. Ms. Austin, I have been a judge for 28 years. In that time I have seen defendants from every walk of life, every background, every economic circumstance. I have seen genuine remorse from people who committed terrible crimes. I have seen arrogance from people who had no right to it. But rarely, very rarely, have I seen someone stand in my courtroom, facing charges for killing another human being, and demonstrate such profound, such breathtaking contempt for the life they took and the suffering they caused. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. You violated your bail conditions repeatedly. You fled the jurisdiction. You posted photographs mocking the very concept of accountability. And now you stand before me suggesting that Elena Vasquez bears some responsibility for her own death because she had the misfortune to be walking home from work when you decided to drive drunk at 3 times the speed limit. Mary's face was a mixture of anger and something else now, the first hints of genuine fear beginning to crack through her entitlement. But she wasn't done yet. She wasn't ready to submit. Instead, she did what people like her always did when cornered. She reached for the weapon she'd been told her entire life was unbeatable. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and looked Judge Monroe directly in the eyes with an expression of pure, distilled arrogance. "Do you know who my father is?" she said, her voice loud enough to carry through the courtroom. The silence that followed was absolute, total, the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. Even her own attorneys looked horrified. Richard Whitmore had actually closed his eyes, as if by not seeing what was happening, he could unmake it. "Excuse me?" Monroe said, his voice soft as silk. "My father," Mary continued, apparently mistaking Monroe's quiet tone for uncertainty, "is Marcus Austin. He employs 15,000 people. He has lunch with senators. He's on a first-name basis with the governor. He donates millions to political campaigns. He makes phone calls and things happen. Problems go away. People who cause problems for our family find themselves..." She paused, searching for the right word. "Reassigned. So before you sit up there on your high horse, judging me, lecturing me, maybe you should think very carefully about who you're dealing with." She wasn't done. The mask had completely shattered now, revealing the entitled, cruel, fundamentally broken person beneath. "You're a public servant. Do you know what that means? It means you work for people like my family. You work for the taxpayers. And my father pays more in taxes in a year than you'll make in your entire career. So maybe show a little respect for the people who pay your salary and stop treating me like a criminal." The gallery had gone beyond shock into something else, a kind of collective disbelief that someone could actually be this tone-deaf, this arrogant, this divorced from reality. Sarah Chen sat frozen at her table, her pen still in hand, as if witnessing something she'd heard about but never believed actually happened. The defense attorneys looked like they wanted to sink through the floor, and Judge Elias Monroe sat perfectly still behind his bench, his hands folded in front of him, his expression utterly unreadable. He let the silence stretch out, let Mary's words hang in the air like toxic gas, let everyone in the courtroom absorb exactly what they'd just witnessed. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost conversational, but it carried a weight that made the air itself feel heavier. "Ms. Austin," he said, "please approach the bench." Mary glanced at her attorneys, but they were staring straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact. She walked forward, her heels clicking on the courtroom floor, each step echoing in the silence. She stopped at the appropriate distance, still defiant, still certain that somehow her father's money and power would materialize like a force field and protect her. Monroe leaned forward, his elbows on the bench, his eyes boring into hers. "You want to know if I know who your father is? The answer is yes. I know exactly who Marcus Austin is. I know he's wealthy. I know he's powerful. I know he makes phone calls and expects results. Now let me tell you who I am." He paused, and in that pause, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. "I am a judge in the superior court of this state. I was appointed to this position by a governor who no longer holds office and who cannot remove me. I was confirmed by a legislature that changes every few years. I hold my position for life, contingent only on good behavior and the judgment of my peers. Your father cannot fire me. The governor cannot fire me. The senators your father has lunch with cannot fire me. I don't care how much money your family has. I don't care who your father calls. In this courtroom, his billions are worth exactly as much as a homeless person's spare change, which is to say, nothing at all." Monroe's voice dropped even lower, forcing everyone to strain to hear. "You said I work for the taxpayers. You're partially correct. I work for justice. I work for the principle that all people, regardless of their bank accounts, deserve equal protection under the law. I work for the idea that a hospice nurse walking home from her shift has exactly the same right to life, to safety, to justice as the daughter of a billionaire. I work for Elena Vasquez's children, who no longer have a mother because you decided your desire to drive drunk and fast was more important than their right to grow up with the woman who loved them." He straightened in his chair, his voice becoming formal, official, final. "Ms. Austin, your bail is hereby revoked. You are remanded to the custody of the county sheriff, effective immediately, to be held without bail pending trial. Furthermore, I am holding you in contempt of court for your threatening statements. That's an additional 30 days in county jail, to be served consecutively to whatever sentence you may receive if convicted. Bailiff, take the defendant into custody." The courtroom erupted again, but this time it was different. Gasps of surprise, some scattered applause quickly silenced, the defense team erupting into objections. Mary's face went white, then red, then white again. "You can't. This is... My father will..." "Your father," Monroe said, cutting through the noise like a knife, "is not here. You are. And in this moment, you are simply another defendant who violated her bail conditions, showed contempt for this court, threatened a sitting judge, and demonstrated beyond any doubt that she poses both a flight risk and a danger to the community if her arrogance and sense of immunity go unchecked. Bailiff, proceed." The bailiff, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, moved forward with handcuffs. Mary backed away, her eyes wild, looking to her attorneys for help that wasn't coming. "No, wait. You don't understand. I didn't mean... This isn't... Ms. Austin," Monroe said, and his voice was almost gentle now, almost sad. "You had every opportunity to show remorse, to take responsibility, to demonstrate even a shred of human decency. Instead, you chose to mock your victim, threaten this court, and attempt to leverage your father's wealth against justice itself. These are the consequences of those choices. I suggest you use your time in custody to reflect on the difference between the power of money and the power of law." The handcuffs clicked shut around Mary's wrists. She was crying now, mascara running down her perfect face, her carefully constructed image crumbling completely. "Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please don't." But it was too late. The bailiff was leading her away, through the door behind the defense table that led to the holding cells. Her attorneys were already on their feet, calling for emergency appeals, citing procedural issues, but their voices sounded hollow even to themselves. Everyone in that courtroom knew what they'd witnessed. Not a miscarriage of justice, but justice finally, belatedly, asserting itself against the kind of privilege that had grown so accustomed to immunity, it had forgotten consequences existed. As the door closed behind Mary Austin, Judge Monroe turned his attention to the remaining defense attorneys. "Mr. Whitmore, I assume you'll be filing an immediate appeal of my bail decision." Whitmore, still shell-shocked, nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. That is your right and your duty to your client. But understand this. I have documented every violation of Ms. Austin's bail conditions. I have screenshots of her social media posts. I have aviation records of her international travel. I have reports from her pretrial services officer detailing her missed appointments and violations. And I have the transcript of today's proceedings, which will show exactly what she said and how she conducted herself. Any appeals court will have access to all of this. Now, is there anything else?" Whitmore shook his head, looking older than he had an hour ago. "No, Your Honor. Then this hearing is concluded. We will reconvene for trial in 6 weeks. Ms. Chen, please coordinate with defense counsel on motions and discovery. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down one final time. The gallery began to disperse, people filing out in clusters, their conversations a buzzing hum of disbelief and satisfaction and schadenfreude. Sarah Chen gathered her files, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes were bright. She had won more than she'd asked for, not just bail revocation, but a complete dismantling of the defendant's credibility before a jury had ever been seated. In the back row of the gallery, a woman in her 70s sat quietly, tears streaming down her face. Next to her, a young boy, maybe 9 years old, held her hand. They were Elena Vasquez's family. They had heard Mary say that maybe their mother and grandmother should have been more careful, that maybe she was somehow responsible for her own death. They had heard Mary invoke her father's power as if it were a divine right. And they had heard Judge Monroe say words they had begun to think didn't exist anymore in a system that seemed designed to protect the wealthy. That in his courtroom at least, justice was more powerful than money. Judge Monroe remained at his bench for a moment after everyone else had gone, his hands still folded, his expression distant. He thought about Elena Vasquez, whom he'd never met, but whose life he'd studied through police reports and victim impact statements. He thought about her children, who would grow up without their mother because a spoiled young woman had decided that speed limits and traffic laws were for other people. He thought about the thousands of cases he'd presided over, the constant battle to maintain faith in a system that was so often manipulated by those with resources to hire the best lawyers, file endless motions, and use the law itself as a weapon against justice. But not in his courtroom, not while he held the gavel. In his courtroom, the law meant what it said, applied to everyone equally, and bent its knee to no dynasty, no fortune, no sense of inherited privilege. That was the oath he'd taken. That was the principle he'd dedicated his life to preserving. And if that meant remanding a billionaire's daughter to county jail, if that meant making an enemy of powerful people, if that meant standing alone against pressure and threats and the quiet corruption of a system designed to favor the few over the many, then so be it. He rose slowly, his robe rustling in the empty courtroom, and walked through the door to his chambers. Behind him, the courtroom stood silent and empty, the afternoon light still filtering through those tall windows, illuminating nothing now but empty benches and the fading echo of words that, for once, had meant exactly what they seemed to mean: justice, regardless of the cost, because anything less was no justice at all. In the holding cell beneath the courtroom, Mary Austin sat on a concrete bench, her cream-colored suit already rumpled, her makeup smeared, her hands still cuffed, staring at nothing. For the first time in her 23 years of existence, she had encountered a boundary that her father's wealth couldn't erase, a consequence her family's power couldn't negotiate away, a reality that all the money in the world couldn't buy her out of. The lesson Judge Monroe had promised to teach her was beginning, and it was more expensive than anything she'd ever purchased, because it cost the one thing she'd always believed she had in infinite supply: immunity from the rules that governed everyone else. If Mary Austin's story proves anything, it's that true justice recognizes no throne, no trust fund, no title that places anyone above accountability, and that the most powerful words in any courtroom aren't threats of money or influence, but the simple, immovable truth that we are all equal before the law. If you believe in that kind of justice, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because we bring you stories that remind us why it matters. Drop "Justice for All" in the comments below, or tell us where you're watching from. Let's build a community that believes consequences matter, regardless of who's writing the checks.